Welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we are going to solve this LeetCode premium question, and it is a hard category problem, right? And the name of the problem is find top scoring student 2, right? And the problem number is 3188. So in this problem, we have been given three tables: student, course, and enrollments, right? So in the student table, we have the column like student ID, student name, major, and in the course uh, table, we have the column like course ID, subject, credit, major, and mandatory. So if you see here also we have the major, here also we have the major. So with these two table, we can join on the major column, right? So student and the courses can be joined on the major column, right? In order to get the full detail of each and every student. So let's say if I join this major computer science with this, so what I will get it for each and every student, I will get which all are the majors which are like mandatory. So true means it is mandatory and false means it is not mandatory. So in each and every major, we have few elective subjects, right? So these false are nothing but the elective subject, elective subjects, right? And this true means mandatory subject, mandatory, right? So I think we understood these two tables. Now let's talk about the enrollments table. So here in the enrollments table, we have the student ID, course ID. So student ID is coming from this table and course ID is coming from the course table, right? And we have the semester, we have grade, and we have GPA. So for each and every student, based on their enrollments, we have the result basically, right? And in the output table, we have only one tab column that is student ID, right? So student 1 and student 3. So how the student 1 and 3 are coming into the output is based on these criteria. So our question is, if any of the student who meet all these criteria, we should return that particular student. So here in the basically in the input table, if you see, we have four students: 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alice, Bob, Charlie, and David. Out of these four students, student ID 1 and 3 uh, are meeting the criteria. So we are returning those two students, right? So let's see what are the criteria over here. So first criteria is have taken all the mandatory courses and at least two elective courses offered in their major. Okay. So as I mentioned, we have few mandatory courses and few elective courses. So a student who will come into the output, their first criteria is that particular student must take all the mandatory courses. So for student one, basically, if you see, major is computer science. For the computer science, this, these four record are there. So two are the mandatory courses, two are the elective courses. So let's talk about this student one. So student one, if you see, enrollment basically give uh, where that particular student has taken and or that particular student is enrolled. So if you see for student one, we have four records. So course ID 101. So course ID 101, it is a mandatory. So let's create here mandatory, non-mandatory. So in the mandatory, we have one. Yes, 101 we have. Then uh, 102, this is the computer science, and here also if you see we have this. So 102, right? And then 105 and 107. See these two courses a student has taken. So 105, 107. So 105, 107. So like student ID 1 has taken two mandatory courses and two non-mandatory, that is elective courses, right? And here if you see, have taken all the mandatory courses and at least two elective courses offered in the major. So this criteria passed, right? This criteria passed. So for a student one, the major is computer science, and for the computer science, we have two uh, like mandatory subject and two elective subject, right? And a student has taken all of them. So this condition met, right? First condition met. Now let's talk about the second condition. Achieve a grade A in all the mandatory courses and at least B in the elective courses. Okay. In the mandatory courses, a student should get A, right? Now let's see over here. So 101 and 102, these two are the mandatory courses, right? And student has got the grade A in both of them. And 105 and 107, these two courses were the non-mandatory, that is the elective courses, and here also a student has got at least B. So at least B means B or above B, right? So above B means A or B. So student should get A or B. So uh, basically the student ID one has met this criteria also, right? So this is also passed, right? And the third is maintain a average GPA of at least 2.5 across all the courses. Okay, so all the courses, 2.5 should be the average GPA, right? So let's talk about the student one. So if you take the average of these four, so basically 4, 4, 4, 3.5. So this average is obviously greater than 2.5, right? That's why we have student ID 1 in the output. I think you understood how we are tackling this. In the similar way, let's talk about the student which is not there in the output. So, student 2, right? Bob, the major is computer science. So, for the computer science, we have these two mandatory courses, right? 101 and 102. Let's see if student 2 has taken all the mandatory courses or not. So for student 2, we have only two record, and 101 and 102. So only two courses this particular student has taken, and this has not taken any of the elective courses. So there it failed. And here also, like uh, in mandatory courses, a student should get a grade A, right? But he has got B, A and B. So here also it fails. So that's why we don't have student ID 2 in the output. Similarly, you can check for the student ID 3 and student ID 4. Now, let's talk about how we can approach this problem, right? Approach. So we need to tackle these three conditions. So I think if you see this, I can see this like criteria three is quite simple. A student who is valid for the output is someone who has got the average GP of 2.5 across all, outside the major or inside the major. So I think what we can do is we can first do the group by on the student ID and take the average of the GPA. So what this will give is this will give the average of all the marks, right? Be it in the major or outside the major. So if it is greater than a 2.5, so first is group by on student ID in the enrollment table, right? And that should be more than 2.5. So this is the criteria one, and this I think this we can easily achieve. Now let's talk about the other criterias. Okay, let me erase this first. Okay, I think sometimes this doesn't work. Okay, okay. Now let's talk about the other criteria. So this criteria basically first have taken all the mandatory courses and at least two elective courses offered in their major. Okay, so by reading this, my first question, like the question which comes in my mind is how many mandatory courses are there, right? If we take if we pull out that, like how many mandatory and elective courses are there for each student. So if we find out this, then we can like easily filter out if that particular student has taken all the mandatory courses or not. So how we can check is we will have simply a filter as if if total mandatory courses is equal to total mandatory taken courses, right? We can easily basically figure out this. And in the same way, we will have to find total elective courses, and out of that, that value should be greater than or equal to 2, right? That value should be greater than equal to 2. So I think our next condition should be total elective and mandatory, that is done. And second, that should be elective should be greater than or equal to 2. Okay. Now, let's talk about the condition 2. Achieve a grade A in all the mandatory courses. Okay, so once we get the total number of mandatory courses, right? Total mandatory, we will again have the check if total mandatory courses is equal to total grade A, right? If this two condition met, then we can say a student has like covered condition 2 also, right? So this condition would be there, and then at least be in the elective courses. Okay, so we will check how many A and B's are there for the elective courses. So A and B in the elective courses. So these condition would be there in the output to tackle these three criterias, right? So I hope you understood the approach. I hope you understood the problem. Now you can pause the video and try to write the solution by yourself also, right? So I will be moving with the solution. Okay, so we discussed about the problem and the approach. Now let's see the solution. So here if you see we have these three tables, right? And I will provide the create statement in the description section. You can try this problem by yourself also, right? So now let's see how we can solve. So as we discuss here, our first criteria or the code would be to group by on the student ID and filter out the record where we have the average GPA less than 2.5, right? So that would be our first approach. So what we are writing is this. So we are grouping on the enrollment. We are grouping on the table enrollments on the column student ID, right? And average GPA should be more than 2.5. So let's do this. Okay, so if you see, we have all the four students whose average GPA is more than 2.5, right? Now, so as we discussed, our um, second condition is basically this. So we covered this condition 3. Now we need to tackle about condition 1 and condition 2. So as we discussed, we need to find all the mandatory and non-mandatory courses and the elective courses like grades, right? So let's discuss that how we can achieve that. So what we are doing is here above, like above in the above city, we have find all the valid students, right? So that is table 1, and we are again joining with the table student. Why? To get to the detail of the valid student, right? So here if you see we have only the student ID, but what we want is we want to join that table with the courses on the major so that we can get all the data of the student and the courses, right? So the courses table will give us um, how many courses are the mandatory, how many courses are not mandatory, and what are the courses ID and everything, right? And the student detail also. So if we join on these two, we will get all the detail of the valid students, right? So that we are doing over here. So this piece, till this piece, we did that, right? Okay, this also, right? So we did all these things, and then we are doing the left join on the enrollment. So what we are doing is we are joining on the student ID, course ID. So if you see here, to join this like enrollment table with these two is student ID and the course ID, right? So that is how we are joining. And the question is why we are doing the left join? Because we want all the details basically of the courses and student, right? That is how we will be able to figure out how many mandatory courses were there, how many like elective courses are there, and what the student has opted. So basically if we do the left join, so wherever the record would be matching, that we will get the value in the right table, right? And wherever it will not match, the enrollment table will have the null, right? So what that means is if the enrollment has null, that means that particular course is not taken by the student, right? So that's why we have done the left join. So once you run this or basically once you um, view the result, you will be able to understand these things, right? So let me query this. Select star from student status. So we have created the second CT, and here what we are taking is student ID, mandatory, and grade. I think we are taking only these three columns because this is what we need, right? So let's run this. Okay. Now here we have the result basically. So for student 1, there were two mandatory courses and he has taken, and the grades are A and A. And for the non-mandatory courses, that is row 2 and row 4, there we have A and B, right? So student 1 qualifies. Similarly, student 2, like two mandatory courses, but not both of them are A. So this is disqualified. Similarly, student 3 qualify, right? Because these two are A mandatory courses and these two are A and B. That means this also qualifies. And student 4 again, like in the mandatory courses he has got B, so this is disqualified. So in the output, we should have A and B. So how we can check this criteria, right? We need to check how many mandatory courses are there, how many A are there, and then similarly, how many non-mandatory courses are there, and how many of them are A and B wherever the student has participated in that particular subject, right? Or taken that particular subject. So that we can achieve using this. So we will, what we will do is we will use the student status table, which we created above, and we will group by the data on the student ID, and we will use this very famous thing, that is uh, in the aggregate function, we have the case when statement. So what we are doing is, if mandatory, that means if this is true, then 1, else 0. So that will give you the total mandatory courses. Similarly, if it is a mandatory and the grade is A, that is total A, like grade A mandatory courses. Similarly, if it is not mandatory and grade is not null, right? If it is not mandatory and grade is not null, that means total taken elective courses. So let me explain you this. So if you see this record. So this is false, this is not mandatory, and grade is also not null. That means student A has participated in the elective subject, right? So that is what this count is, or this KPI is. And then we have the total not mandatory. Basically, the course is not mandatory and the grade in A and B. So this will give us the total elective good grades, right? So we have this criteria that in the elective, the student must have got at least A and B, right? Not beyond that. So that is what we are getting over here. So let me basically query this. So let me do star over here, and we are getting error. Okay, so this should not be there. Okay, so we got this detail basically, right? Now it is quite easy. We can have just a where clause to check all these three conditions. So first condition is total mandatory should equal to the total grade A, that is there, and then the total elective should be more than 2, and then the total elective courses should be equal, like whatever is the total elective courses, their grade should be good grade, that is A or B. So that is how we tackle this. And if we run this, we are getting student 1 and 3, and out of this, like all this condition are met, and in the final output we just need student ID. So we can just drag this over here, right? And run this. So yes, we have got our required output. So yes, I think we have completed this problem. So if you like this content, please do like, subscribe, and share the channel. And let's meet in the next problem.